Hi, today we're catching up with a lot of special guests, and let's do a roll call and have everybody introduce themselves.
Okay, I'm T-Nut the Nutty Professor.
And I'm William Tariq Palmer, AKA Soul Brother Number 9.
And I'm Dennis Childs, work down here in San Diego with All of Us or None chapter in San Diego, also a professor at University of California, San Diego.
Hey.
And this is Avalon Edwards. I'm a current policy fellow with Starting Over Inc., which is a wraparound reentry services provider in Riverside County, as well as with the Riverside chapter of All of Us or None. It's good to be here.
Good to have y'all. Well, man, it's an honor to have us on here today because, like, you know, today what we're doing is we're talking about the 13th Amendment, which is on the U.S. Constitution, but we're specifically speaking about California today and the opportunity we have to make a difference when it comes down to getting rid of slavery in California. So I think all in all, like, you know, we're gonna have a really good thing. It's gonna talk about the history of the resolution. We're gonna give a context, a historical context of slavery, and then, like, you know, what it is like to be inside the prison. And then we'll wrap it up with some next steps and some to-dos, you know, that you could possibly get involved in. With that all said, let's introduce Avalon to give like a brief history of this resolution.
For sure, thanks, Terrance. So this resolution, all in all, that we're going to be talking about today and giving kind of more of that historical context and political context for, is a resolution that was proposed by Riverside County Supervisor Manny Perez in work with Legal Services for Prisoners with Children, as well as the Riverside chapter of All of Us or None. So this was kind of put together by these community-based organizations, really to signal that the county is in support of ACA3, which is a California constitutional amendment to basically abolish slavery in all of its forms with no exceptions in the state of California. To clarify, the Riverside County Board of Supervisors doesn't get to vote directly on ACA3. The resolution is to show, as representatives of Riverside County, that we speak for Riverside County and we say we support ACA3. Now, it hasn't been voted on yet, and that's kind of why we're here today, to talk about it and give folks in Riverside some more context about this, because it was originally proposed in early February. Then it got pushed back, the vote didn't happen, it got pushed to the next week, and then the vote didn't happen again. And the reason for that is because people didn't have enough information. Residents didn't know what it was about. People were submitting comments, public comments saying, don't vote for this or vote for this, and they weren't citing actually information that was relevant to the resolution. And so it became very clear that, especially to Supervisor Perez and his office, that there wasn't enough public education about ACA3. And so they wanted to educate the board and the public more about what ACA3 is before having this vote. So that's some of the general context. And yeah, and I'll share some more later about how to get involved if people are interested in that, but I can pass it to y'all for the context on that and the historical background.
Okay, I think I was supposed to, you know, just do a little bit of a historical background on the topic of involuntary servitude. And I would just say that in terms of the ACA3 initiative and proposal, you know, I think that it's important to have historical context. And when in California we talk about involuntary servitude, I think it's great that in the initiative that the language, you know, gets rid of the euphemism and breaks it down to its real fundamental truth, which is that involuntary servitude is a continuation of slavery. And if you think about California being one of the prison capitals of the world, with one of the highest, you know, populations of people inside the walls, in jails, prisons, immigrant detention facilities, and such, you know, it's a story that goes back to the original racialized incarceration in the United States, which is chattel slavery. For Black people, you know, when you read slave narratives and such, going all the way back to like Oloada Equiano talking about being a child kidnapped from modern day Nigeria, excuse me, and put onto a slave ship, and put into a barracoon and then a slave pen and then a slave plantation, you know, you can't read that history without connecting it to what was its aftermath. So when people talk about the new Jim Crow, we also talk about the new slavery. So in that sense, slavery in my work, in my writings and my teachings is not just something that's foundational to something like the murders of people like Breonna Taylor and George Floyd and Tamir Rice, and the endless names of people that we could go on, including actually my father, who was murdered by the police when I was 7 years old. That, you know, when we talk about these things, we talk about it in the context of a continuation of a long list of names going back to 1619 and even before. So in terms of the 13th Amendment itself, I'm sure your listeners and viewers know, maybe having watched Ava DuVernay's film 13th or read the work of people like Assata Shakur, Rochelle McGee, you know, political prisoners, Black radical political prisoners who really broke this down before there was any documentary about it. The original, you know, what this resolution comes from is the language of the amendment to the Constitution, the 13th Amendment, which was supposed to have freed 4 million Africans. But that very amendment to the US Constitution, which supposedly did that, legalized slavery again as punishment in the language of that amendment to the US Constitution. Slavery is illegal and involuntary servitude is illegal except for punishment for a crime. And so what we had happen immediately after that, because that was not accidental, I write about this in my own work, that in the congressional debates leading up to that language that is both in the state constitution of California and in the US Constitution in the 13th Amendment, in the debates, the congressional debates, what you hear is white supremacists saying we got to have this exception clause in there. And you have people like Charles Sumner from Massachusetts saying, wait a minute, we have this, if we're trying to get rid of slavery, why are we re-legalizing it through criminalization? Well, the white supremacists who were debating against him knew full well what they were doing, which is setting up those 4 million African people to be re-enslaved for living the predictable outcomes of structural poverty, racism, apartheid that came about as the direct results of chattel slavery. So you had the birth of convict leasing, where private companies became the state penitentiaries of the Southern US. And that was a genocidal system where anywhere between 10 to 60% Black prisoners would die every year as a result of the labor they were doing mine work, railroad work, turpentine work, regular slave plantation work that we think of as associated with chattel slavery, but also industrializing the Southern economy. You had the chain gang system, which was the misdemeanor form of that same thing than convict leasing. You had the prison plantation system, which took over for convict leasing in places like, because I mentioned Rochelle McGee earlier, you know, he's sitting in now almost 60 years of political imprisonment, but he started his imprisonment as a teenager who got convicted for that age-old crime of a Black man supposedly raping a white woman back in the day in Louisiana, and put onto a modern day slave plantation that right now, as we're in this conversation, Black people, a mostly Black prison population in what's called Angola prison in Louisiana, is doing the same kind of labor that Black people have been doing on that plantation since the 19th century. That, in other words, that plantation has never closed for business since it opened in the 19th century. But what the works of people like Assata Shakur and Rochelle McGee show us, because Rochelle McGee started Angola and then he ended up being re-imprisoned out here in California. And, you know, what him and George Jackson and so many other California prisoners tell us is that, you know, Susan Burton, all the way up to now in her project, A New Way of Life, is that the situation that Black folks face in the South and other poor folks, brown folks, indigenous people, poor people in general, the things that they faced in the 19th century and before got refabricated in what's now called the penitentiaries of the North and West Coast as well, from Attica to Jackson to Florence to, you know, Pelican Bay, otherwise known as Skeleton Bay. So I don't want to ramble on too much, but suffice it to say, All of Us or None is a really good organization to be leading this charge, because All of Us or None is the organization that led the charge against the Scarlet Letter C on job applications, the Ban the Box initiative. And what you know, All of Us or None and other organizations, Critical Resistance and others that we can talk about later, say is that, you know, black and poor people, brown people, don't, you know, it's really hard to find a job on the streets, but when you end up getting put into prison, every element of what makes the prison works depends on prison neo-slave labor. Curtis Howard, who's the chapter lead down here in San Diego, talks about when he was working the fry station at one of the facilities that he was in, he's making something like 30 cents an hour, that the person that's his supposed supervisor from the free world is sitting there doing nothing, making $30 an hour. But when Curtis Howard came on the streets, he couldn't get a job doing the same thing that he was paid slave wages for on the inside. So, you know, it's a complicated thing. It's not just about that kind of labor. You could be just warehoused in a solitary confinement cage, but companies and politicians are making political power and money off of you being warehoused. So this initiative is really about not just today, but looking to history and how it informs what's going on right now. So I'll just leave it at that for now.
Could I add one thing to that? Because I think that's an amazing context for this. And also, I think a misconception that a lot of people have is that private prisons are the only prisons producing this labor. It's objectively not true. This is happening in state-controlled prisons in California and county-controlled jails in California. Riverside County has 5 jails. There's over 3,500 people in those jails today. This is happening here. This is happening in our backyard. And this is happening not just by evil private corporations who are taking advantage of this labor. It is the state and your county doing this. And I think that's a really important distinction that doesn't get made often enough. So I just wanted to throw that out there.
Avalon, thank you so much for saying that, because, you know, most people of the 2.3 million people who are incarcerated in cages are not in so-called or actual private facilities run by private corporations, even though there are private corporations using some of the labor of most of the prisoners who are in state and county facilities. You know, I was given a talk at CSU Fullerton one time at the Black graduation, and I talked about Victoria's Secret using prisoner labor to make sales calls. And a woman came up to me after the graduation and said, "I can't believe you said that." I said, "Why?" She said, "Because I called to order something the other day, and when it was time for me to give my name and address, the person on the other end said, 'Oh, you don't have to tell me who you are. I know who you are.'" And she was like, "What?" She said, "How do you know who I am?" She said, "Because I'm your brother." And he was locked up in a state facility in California. But then that same talk that I gave at CSU Fullerton, I told the graduates I didn't want to rain on their parade, but every stick of furniture that they were sitting on, every chair of the whole California State University system is made by prison slave labor.
Right.
So anyway.
And even license plates, you know, like everybody who got a car, you know, it's on their license plate. They was making license plates at Folsom, you know what I mean? So like this is it's very embedded, man. And it's sick that like in 2021, we're still talking about getting rid of slavery. You know what I mean? Like this is beyond me. You know what I mean? And it's like you said, like they're using it to warehouse bodies to make money. And it's like a whole lot of other companies, like the Bob Barker company, that completely exist because of prisons. And it's one of the richest companies. It's one of the richest companies in America. And it exists just because of the prison. It's rich because of the prison, and it don't even sell nothing outside of the prison. So like, you know, like it's funding people and making people rich as well. Like, and it's a sad truth, but slavery wasn't just because people were messed up. They were making money off of bodies then. So like, you know, a lot of times people just look at the cruelty and the mean part about it, but it was all about economics, and it's still what this prison is about today, you know? So I think, like, you know, to all y'all points, it's sick and it's sad that like we're still slavery alive on the US Constitution, on the California Constitution, and all these other state constitutions, you know? So I think, like, you know, to your point, like it's been time. You know, I watched that movie 13, and Newt Gingrich was talking about it ain't even right. And I ain't never agreed too much with nothing Newt Gingrich had to say. You know what I mean? So, you know what I mean? So like, yes, that's why it's imperative that, like, you know, we start to educate people about what the system that's going on, because a lot of people like Avalon Point have some kind of veil over their eyes and not looking at what's really going on and just listening to what they're being told.
Mm-hmm. That's right. And, you know, that just one more thing from my point is that, you know, even if you're not working for a Victoria's Secret or Nordstrom's, and even if you're not so-called working at all, like, the fact of the matter is that if you have a job market out in the so-called free world where there's not any place to put people, and that's why in my new work I'm talking about is a system of anti-Black genocide, because it's kind of if you have a whole millions of people who you're not allowing into the job market in any kind of way in the free world, then what Mumia calls the biggest public housing project in history comes to the fore, which is, okay, this is a kind of solution to the problem of Black existence in the United States. So it's outside, it's not even just restricted to that issue of labor. It's like, what do you do with people for whom you refuse to make a place in society? And it is a kind, it then comes into this idea of a kind of final solution to that problem.
That's real. Oh my gosh.
Hey, it is a dream to be on KUCR 88.3 FM. This is Soul Brother number 9 and Dr. Charles. What an honor. I love being with All of Us Anon fam, Avalon from All of Us Anon, Riverside, my boy Terrance, man. So excited to be here. And it was a childhood dream to be on this radio station. Born and raised on the east side of Riverside, I have a rich history with UCR, and now working for Legal Services for Prisoners with Children and repping All of Us Anon, the Oakland chapter, as a communication policy fellow. I couldn't be more happier talking about this subject. Now, I understand involuntary servitude real well. My experience as an involuntary servant started in 1988. As an ignorant Black juvenile youth offender, coerced into accepting a plea bargain for life in prison. And the Board of Parole hearings was okay with me dying in prison, despite the simplicity of my crime during my youth. As a high school dropout and functional illiterate, my mother stressed, education is gonna be your freedom. While I was inside, I pursued an education, although I raised my TAB score that they call TAB, which stands for Test of Adult-Based Education. My score went from like 4 point something to 9.5 or above. And then I was forced to work and give up my studies. So when we talk about forced labor, when we talk about slavery, another word, by another word, involuntary servitude, I experienced it for real. And the more I became educated, the more I began to understand how my nationality connected me to slavery. Because under the United States Constitution, slavery was based on the blood of Africans. That's it. And so I remember working ultimately towards this freedom of getting out of that constitutional slavery. Man, it hits home so much. I remember being offered 45 cents to 95 cents to be in an elite assignment, mind you, doing laundry where they will work you long and hard beyond 8 hours a day, disregarding safety concerns or any type of work laws. They would roll you out during lockdowns, and they would do, and we'd be doing things that they do COVID-19 right now. They don't, while everybody else is under lockdown inside of prison, workers for PIA laundry to go make that money for the prison, they marching them to the sites. And while I refused to maintain the prison industrial complex while I was inside, I knew I needed a work assignment that would give me time to become educated and work towards ultimate freedom. And those work assignments paid less than 9 cents an hour. Again, I went from the opportunity to work endlessly while making 45 cents an hour to having time for my studies by making 9 cents an hour. I made this choice. I made that choice, man, because it wasn't about zooms and whams at canteen and packages and all of that. I stayed in the education department, studying and earning my associate's degree in business management, creating business plans and participating in groups like the 5 Ventures that brought in business leaders and CEOs that own billion-dollar companies, shaking hands with people who I would later meet on the outside to give me my first steps into society as an employed person. So I volunteered. Once I reached that level of understanding, I started to volunteer helping youth offenders in the independent youth offender program called IYO. They changed the name later on. And later I started an independent college program for older prisoners who were shut out of that program through the chapel called For Those That Think, you know, because I was always inspired by people who thought outside of their boxes, outside of their circumstances. So I can go on and on with examples. I choose to become a self-advocate with the help of the legal manuals from LSPC. I had no idea, though, that my self-help petition, along with pro bono help from O'Melveny and Myers, located in San Francisco, that Tariq Palmer 1, 2, and 3 would change rules and regulations throughout California and others seeking the protection therefore helping others in my circumstances, and find myself working in the organization that helped in my involuntary servitude and for tens of thousands. So as I was also in this self-taught, also being this self-taught artist, and it is the ultimate poetic justice after serving over 3 decades to have my artwork used for the coalition I am working to form through All of Us None, entitled the ABC Collective. And that stands for Abolishing Bondage Collectively. And we're going to kick the Jim Crow's, you know what, out of the California Constitution, potentially ending involuntary servitude for every human being in California. You can register to be a part of the coalition at prisonerswithchildren.org/ABC. But man, as it is a dream to be on this show, my 31 years in prison turned out to be a divine tempering, because I am now penitentiary steward. I swore for this revolution. And as the host of One Community, One Mic, a live webinar on LSPC's Facebook page every second and fourth Thursday at noon, allowing our All of Us None chapters and guests share the think tank strategies with the nation and the world. My first show is going to be on March 11th. It's about reimagining re-entry. So please tune in. Go to prisonerswithchildren.org/ABC and for information to join that coalition and remove involuntary servitude from California's Constitution, man. I'm living my life's purpose and dream. But more than anything, man, as my father came back from the Korean War and was still called an N-word, he left to join the Black Power movement and left me and my moms and my family to fend for ourselves, because for that, he thought it was a higher cause. So I was born, my DNA was given to me at birth to do this work. So it's an honor and a pleasure, man. And I love being around you, people like you guys, who we can discuss this and share this with California.
Right on, man. Right on with the right on, you know. It's an honor for you to be on this thing. I'm glad you came on KUCR when I was here with you. You know what I mean? So much love and respect for you, brother. Avalon, you got some highlights?
Yeah, and thank you everybody for sharing your like academic and personal expertise on this. I mean, it is a stain on the reputation of our nation. It's a stain on the reputation of our state, and it's a stain on the reputation of Riverside County, that we're using this labor in Riverside County, and the Sheriff's Department knows it. They're in charge of caging the 3,500 at least people in our 5 jails, and folks in those jails are doing labor to keep up the jails, right? It's administrative. Sometimes it's picking up trash on the side of the highway. Sometimes it depends, but they're getting financial value. The county is getting financial value out of abusing this labor. So that's why this is so important, like for Riverside County specifically, just to bring it home. Riverside County has a really unique opportunity. Not every county board of supervisors is going to be voting on this in the state of California. This is something that we got because Supervisor Perez pushed for it. And so it's going to be on the agenda on Tuesday the 9th, and the meeting starts at 9:30 a.m. And I'd really like to encourage people to delve more into this beyond listening to this amazing group of people talk about it. We have a toolkit ready to educate people about ACA3 and specifically why it matters in Riverside County and how to get involved in Riverside County. And I'll say it once or twice. It is a bit.ly link. So it's bit.ly/ and then all of the letters are going to be capital A1S6RIV. Again, it's bit.ly/ capital letters A1S6RIV. That document is going to share with you some more reasons why we're opposing this, why we oppose slavery in the state of California, and why we oppose slavery in Riverside County. I'd also recommend that people follow Riverside All of Us or None on social media. We're posting about this and basically everything else related to criminal justice reform in Riverside County, where it's just Riverside All of Us or None on Twitter, on Facebook, on Instagram. You can find us there, and we'll be sharing more about this resolution specifically. But again, I'd like to say it's a unique opportunity. Like, we've actually been given a unique opportunity to stand up and say, we reject slavery in all its forms, no exceptions. We reject mass incarceration and the horrible impacts it has on our community. We reject this wholeheartedly, and we reject it proudly. And the reason that that's important is because the board isn't decided on this vote yet. It is not a given that this resolution is going to pass. We know that board members are on the fence about this. We know that the other side, the opposition, specifically law enforcement, has organized in opposition to the resolution. They got over 100 people to submit public comment in opposition when it was originally put on the agenda, when we had 30 people submitting comment in support. So there's real resistance, and resistance happens because people see that there's real potential for change, right? And so there's a real potential for this, for ACA3 to change the realities for thousands of incarcerated Californians and also their families, if we can talk about that, right? If you're earning pennies for your labor, you're not able to provide for your family outside. You're working a full-time job, but you're not making minimum wage even, right? You're not even making close to it. And so what is the benefit that you can give to your family, including the costs of incarceration are insanely high, not just court costs, but phone calls, commissary. There's tons of, Riverside County actually charges people for their own incarceration in the county. So all that to say, I think this is a unique opportunity. I hope people go to our toolkit, learn some more, go to our social media accounts, learn how to get engaged. You have until the morning of Tuesday, March 9th. I recommend that everybody get involved how they can. You can either submit comments, written comments on the website, or register to call in and speak directly to your local representatives about how you feel about this resolution. So yeah.
Right. Ain't there a like a deadline that you have to submit to speak?
So that's actually recently been changed. So folks can register to speak up until 9 a.m., maybe 9:30, but I'd recommend 9 a.m. On the day of. Don't postpone it though. If you're listening to this now, next chance you get, register to speak or submit a comment expressing your feelings about this. But yeah, you can technically go until Tuesday.
And then what's that website again?
Oh yeah, so for submitting comment or registering to call in, it's the Riverside Clerk of the Board's website, and I'll say it out loud. It's www.rivcocob.org. Once again, it's www.rivcocob.org. And it'll come up if you Google Riverside Clerk of the Board as well.
And real quick, what's the name of the actual what is it, the American Constitution? What's the name of it?
It's a Assembly Constitutional Amendment 3.
It's ACA3, right?
Mm-hmm. ACA3 is the statewide legislation. Mm-hmm.
Yes. So that's another thing, you could look it up for yourself and find out more. It's because we're talking about Riverside County right now, but some people don't live in Riverside County. You might be passing through hearing this. This is something that might be on the ballot coming up soon, and it might be somewhere else where you can you can find out more and make your voice heard about it. So that's something that you could look up, ACA3.
And I would just like to add one thing. It touches on what everybody has said. The American Revolution started because Great Britain wanted to end slave economics. A lot of people don't know that. And you might want to look it up if you think that I'm fooling you, because we didn't get taught this in school. But the throwing over the tea into the harbor, that was because Great Britain, for its colonies and all its territories, wanted to end. They were writing up legislation to end slave-based economy. Again, the Civil War was based on slave-based economy. It took slavery from the state and from the individual and gave it to the state. So I'm asking Californians and Riversiders in general, do you really want your economy based on slavery or involuntary servitude? This ain't about being hard or soft on crime or criminals. This is about humanity. This is about stopping one of the original sins of this country. And this is what we're asking to be. I am not advocating to open up the prison doors and let everybody out. I've been there. I know that some people might need to be there. I'm saying that even while you're there being punished for the crime you have done, do not warehouse human beings for the exploitation of economic gain. That is a sin on any level of religious beliefs or just human beliefs, period.
Well, with that said, thank you for joining the program, and appreciate everybody taking their time to speak and impart their knowledge today.
Thanks for
Thank
having
you.
me.
Thank you for having us, Fungus.